General Hospital Spoiler revealed that Dany and Charlotte never expected that. The strange sense of tension growing between them would lead to anything more than confusion, curiosity, or the awkwardness of two teenagers trying to understand their place in Port Charles. But everything shifted the day they uncovered a truth so deep, so unsettling, that it shook the foundation of their identities. What began as a simple curiosity about their shared Cassadine connection suddenly spiraled into a discovery capable of rewriting not just their personal histories, but the entire power structure surrounding the Cassadine name. This was not merely a revelation, it was an earthquake that tore through the quiet spaces of their lives, exposing a secret that someone had buried with ruthless precision. Dany and Charlotte were far more closely tied to each other than anyone had ever admitted. And worse, this bond connected to a secret that could unravel their families from the inside out. Everything began with rumors, fragments of whispers connected to Jason's long absences, strange medical documents that never seemed to match up, and the haunting way adults stiffened whenever the topic of Dany's paternity surfaced. Dany had always believed he knew who he was. Jason Morgan's son, Sam's child. A kid with a legacy shaped by heroism, danger, and the unmistakable shadow of the Morgan name. But curiosity had a way of gnawing at him, especially when Charlotte, who carried the Cassadine bloodline with uneasy certainty, began to question the same cracks in her own family story. Valentin's past was riddled with lies, manipulation, and reinvention, and Charlotte had grown up understanding that the truth in her family was never a clean, simple thing. With Valentin, truth was a weapon, not a comfort. With Helena Cassadine in the shadows of every story, truth was a labyrinth, not a map. And with Victor Cassadine's legacy of secrets, truth was always dangerous. So when Dany and Charlotte stumbled upon the first clue, that strange medical report mislabeled with Jason's name but containing DNA markers Dany had never seen before, they knew something was wrong. It wasn't just the numbers that unsettled them. It was the feeling. The sense that the adults in their lives were hiding something enormous. The sense that they had stumbled into something they were never meant to find. And when they followed that clue deeper, finding an encrypted file in Valentin's private system, a file that should have been destroyed years ago, they found the truth that shattered everything. Jason Morgan was not Dany's biological father. Valentin Cassadine was. The shock of this revelation hit Dany like a physical blow. He felt the world tilt, reality stretching thin until it barely held together. His identity, his entire sense of belonging fractured in a single instant. Jason Morgan was a hero, a protector, a legend in Port Charles. Dany had shaped his childhood around the idea of being Jason's son. He had imagined a future built from Jason's strength, Jason's honor, Jason's unbreakable loyalty. And now that foundation crumbled, leaving him suspended in a state of disbelief. To learn that Valentin Cassadine, one of the most feared and manipulative members of the Cassadine dynasty, was his real father, was not simply confusing. It was catastrophic. It meant he wasn't the boy he thought he was. It meant his bloodline was darker, sharper, far more dangerous. It meant he was tied to a legacy built on chaos, not justice. For Charlotte, the revelation was equally devastating, though in a different way. She had always carried the burden of the Cassadine name with equal parts pride and fear. The weight of her family's sins followed her everywhere, shaping how others saw her. She had hoped Dany, despite being connected through Alexis, was free from the deeper corruption of the Cassadine roots. But learning that Dany was not only part of her family, but directly tied to her own line through Valentin, meant she was no longer the only Cassadine descendant facing the curse of her family's past. It also meant something she had never anticipated. Dany was her half-brother. This truth sent their world into chaos. Every moment they had shared, every conversation, every spark of friendship, everything was now rewritten under the shadow of a biological connection, deeper than either of them had ever imagined. The sense of closeness they had always felt suddenly made sense, but it came with a crushing, suffocating weight. Their growing bond had been confusing before. Now, it was unbearable. But the emotional aftermath was only one part of the disaster. The political implications within the Cassadine family, within the Morgan name, within Port Charles were explosive. Valentin had spent years rebuilding his life, clinging to Charlotte as his one true anchor. If the world discovered he also had a son he never knew, Jason Morgan's presumed child, no less, the fallout would be catastrophic. The Cassadine hierarchy would shift overnight. Valentin's enemies would weaponize the truth. Alexis's entire family history would fracture once again. Sam would be caught between guilt and fury. Jason, even in his silence, would become a symbol of betrayal and confusion. And Dany, young and not prepared for the political warfare of adults, would become the center of a storm that could swallow him whole. Dany's mind raced with questions. Why had this secret been hidden? Who knew the truth? Did Jason know? Did Sam? Did Valentin? Was he conceived under manipulation? Under lies? Under medical interference? Because with the Cassadine name involved, anything was possible. The Cassadines were notorious for genetic tampering, stolen embryos, engineered births, and hidden children. The more Dany thought, the more he feared that his entire existence had been scripted by someone else. Someone with a darker agenda than he could ever comprehend. Charlotte, shaken but determined, became the only person who understood the magnitude of this discovery. Together, they realized they were holding a truth that could destroy lives. Yet something strange began to form between them, not romance, not friendship, but a shared sense of responsibility. A sense that they had to uncover how deep the conspiracy went. A sense that they could no longer trust the adults around them. A sense that they were standing at the edge of a mystery that would define their futures. This revelation was not merely a twist in their story, it was a dangerous acceleration. Proof that the Cassadine family had once again manipulated destiny through secrecy. And now, Dany and Charlotte carried knowledge powerful enough to cause war, collapse alliances, and unravel everything the families in Port Charles believed to be true. Because if Jason Morgan was not Dany's father, if Valentine Cassadine was, then the balance of the entire Cassadine legacy had shifted. And for the first time in their young lives, Dany and Charlotte understood that they were not simply characters in a family drama. They were the key players in a generational catastrophe waiting to erupt. Dany and Charlotte were still reeling from the discovery that bound them in a way neither of them had ever imagined. But the shock of their shared bloodline quickly collided with a new crisis. Valentine was in danger, and the threat looming over him was far greater than anything either of them had anticipated. What began as a personal catastrophe suddenly evolved into a larger, more dangerous mission, forcing the two teenagers into a world of secrets, calculations, and risks once reserved only for the most ruthless members of the Cassadine family. The shift was immediate and undeniable. Their identities had changed. Their relationship had changed. And now, the entire fate of their newly entangled family rested on their ability to uncover the truth, threatening Valentine from the shadows. This crisis didn't merely push Dany and Charlotte closer, it pulled them into obsession. The obsession wasn't romantic or emotional this time, it was survival. They had stumbled into a truth so explosive that it placed Valentine at the center of a deadly game. And once they realized the dangers surrounding him, they became fixated on solving it. This fixation became their anchor, their driving force, their justification for every risky step they took. For Charlotte, saving Valentine was instinctive. He had been her father, her protector, her fractured but beloved source of stability for as long as she could remember. For Dany, the mission felt more complicated. Valentine wasn't just a stranger anymore, he was his father. The revelation created an immediate, overwhelming need to protect a man he barely knew but was suddenly connected to, in the deepest way possible. This protective instinct grew rapidly, overpowering the fear he felt about the truth. The danger became personal, and personal danger always turned into obsession. The more they investigated Valentine's situation, the clearer it became that this was no ordinary threat. Someone was moving against him with a precision that echoed the Cassadine legacy. Someone who knew the inner workings of the family's secrets, their weaknesses, their hidden history. The deeper Dany and Charlotte dug, the more they realized Valentine wasn't just in danger. He was being strategically dismantled. Every piece of his life, business, alliances, assets, personal relationships was being targeted. And whoever was behind it didn't just want to ruin him, they wanted to erase him. This revelation forced Dany and Charlotte into a new phase of their journey: calculated action. They could no longer simply uncover secrets, they had to use them. And this is where the real madness began. The adjustment happening within them was no longer emotional confusion about identity. It became a shift into strategy, manipulation, and a willingness to step into the moral grayness that defined the Cassadine dynasty. Something awakened in them, a Cassadine instinct, that cold, razor-sharp ability to analyze, predict, and manipulate threats. They began to understand the world the way Cassadines always had, not through trust, but through leverage. They started gathering information, watching Valentine's enemies, piecing together a conspiracy that stretched through Port Charles, like an invisible network of danger. The more they uncovered, the more they realized they needed to act quickly and quietly. Adults couldn't be trusted. Valentine couldn't be warned. The more people knew, the more danger everyone faced. So Dany and Charlotte worked alone, driven not just by fear, but by the growing sense of power that came with knowing they held pieces of a puzzle no one else had. The discovery of Dany's true paternity had already rewired their perspectives. Now, it pushed them into a new identity: to Cassadine heirs fighting a silent war. And with every new piece of information, their obsession grew. They were no longer trying to survive the truth, they were trying to manipulate it. They were no longer trying to escape the Cassadine legacy. they were beginning to embody it. The danger surrounding Valentine forced them into a role. Neither was prepared for strategists in a family war, and once they stepped into that role, something inside them clicked into place. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and irreversible. They discovered financial inconsistencies, threats hidden behind coded documents, and traces of a plan designed to collapse Valentine from the inside. Each discovery fed their determination. Each new clue made them more certain that only they could stop what was coming. The adjustments inside them intensified, becoming a blend of fear, responsibility, and the haunting realization that they were no longer children. Looking for answers, they were Cassadine's calculating survival. The obsession with saving Valentine became more than a mission. It became a transformation. Dany began to think the way Valentine did, methodically, strategically, always anticipating betrayal. Charlotte, who had grown up under the shadow of Cassadine manipulation, slipped easily into the role of planner, analyzer, decision-maker. Together, they formed a silent alliance built not on innocence but on necessity. And with each passing hour, the situation grew more dangerous. The more they uncovered, the more Valentine's enemy tightened the noose. The more they intervened, the deeper they fell into the chaos. Their minds raced with calculations: what to reveal, whom to manipulate, whether to use the truth about Dany's paternity as a weapon or keep it hidden. The entire situation spiraled into something almost unreal. The world around them blurred as they became consumed by their mission. Their choices became sharper, their lies became cleaner. Their strategies became increasingly Cassadine in nature. They were becoming the thing they feared, young heirs navigating a legacy built on obsession and power. And through it all, the danger grew. The conspiracy closing around Valentine began to close around them too. Charlotte saw shadows where none existed. Dany listened for threats in every silence. The madness of their mission became a force neither of them could pull away from, and soon, their obsession wasn't just about saving Valentine. It was about proving themselves capable of surviving the Cassadine curse. This is where the story truly becomes unhinged. The more Dany and Charlotte fight to protect Valentine, the more they uncover the truth about their own identities. The more they become exactly what the Cassadine legacy always intended them to be. And that realization, dark, twisted, and unstoppable, is what makes everything truly insane. Because Dany and Charlotte aren't just trying to save Valentine anymore. They are stepping into a destiny that could destroy them, or turn them into the most dangerous Cassadine pair the family has ever produced. The moment Jason uncovers the truth that Dany is not his son hits him with a force sharper and more devastating than any physical blow he has taken in a lifetime of violence. Jason has survived gunshots, explosions, betrayals, and near-death more times than poor Charles can count. But nothing prepares him for the emotional collapse that comes with realizing the boy he raised, the child he protected with every instinct he possessed, is not biologically his. The truth shatters him. It fractures the identity he built as a father, leaving him suspended between disbelief and a quiet, suffocating rage. But the shock does not stop with Jason. The revelation triggers a domino effect, one that will shift the entire landscape of Dany's storyline and reshape the power dynamics of poor Charles in a way no one could have predicted. The adjustment begins with a single piece of information, a secret ripped from the shadows. Valentine Cassadine, not Jason Morgan, is Dany's biological father. This discovery doesn't simply rewrite a birth certificate, it rewrites destinies, alliances, loyalties, and bloodlines. For Jason, the truth feels like betrayal of trust, of family, of identity. For Dany, it becomes a door into the darkest dynasty in General Hospital history. And for the Cassadine Empire, it introduces a new heir, a new threat, and a new source of chaos. Jason's shock is immediate and consuming. He replays every memory of Dany, his first steps, his first words, the night spent protecting him, the moments he believed he was shaping a son in his own image. Now, all of those memories feel stolen, contaminated by a truth he never saw coming. Jason's mind spirals through questions. Did Sam know? Did Valentine know? Was this another Cassadine scheme? Was Dany created through manipulation? Was he engineered, tampered with, stolen before he drew his first breath? With the Cassadine name involved, nothing seems impossible. And Jason's instinct to protect Dany twists into something darker, an instinct to uncover the truth, at any cost. But while Jason is drowning in emotional shock, Dany is undergoing his own transformation, a shift so radical and explosive that it threatens to flip his entire future upside down. The boy who grew up believing he would carry the Morgan legacy now finds himself pulled into the gravitational field of the Cassadines, a family where control, power, and manipulation are woven into the blood. Dany's identity begins to realign, as if some dormant force inside him has been awakened. The Cassadine adjustment begins slowly, at first a heightened awareness, a sharper instinct about people, a sense of calculation he never had before. Then it intensifies. His decisions become more deliberate. His curiosity becomes more dangerous. And his once stable sense of self cracks under the pressure of a destiny he never asked for. Everyone around Dany feels a shift. Sam sees a chill in his eyes she cannot name. Alexis recognizes the Cassadine edge she has spent her life trying to escape. Charlotte senses a new magnetic pull between them, not romantic, but familial, powerful, and deeply dangerous. And Valentin Valitin feels something he never expected, fear. Because Dany is not just a Cassadine heir, he may be the one Cassadine heir, capable of surpassing every generation before him. The Cassadine family has always been rooted in power, lineage, and legacy. Their inheritance is not wealth, it is influence, strategy, and the ability to reshape the world around them. And now Dany stands at the center of that inheritance. The moment the truth surfaces, the Cassadine hierarchy shifts. Valentin is no longer the last remaining power of his line. Helena's blood legacy is suddenly reborn in a boy who grew up with Jason Morgan's instincts. And Sam McCall's resilience. Dany becomes the most dangerous combination Port Charles has ever seen. A Cassadine with a Morgan's will. This is where the storyline explodes into madness. Dany's future, once predictable, once tied to Jason's quiet strength, fractures into two paths, the boy he used to be, and the heir he is becoming. The new adjustment inside him pushes him towards secrets, toward power, toward a desire to understand what it means to carry the Cassadine name. And the more he learns, the more unstable the world around him becomes. This is not simply a character shift, it is the birth of a new force in Port Charles, one capable of altering the balance of every family, every feud, every alliance. The chaos deepens as Dany's behavior begins reflecting the Cassadine awakening inside him. He becomes more calculating, more confident, more intuitive about danger. The innocence he once carried quietly dissolves, replaced by an emerging instinct for control. Charlotte watches the transformation with a mixture of fear and fascination, knowing better than anyone what the Cassadine legacy does to a person. And Jason, still grappling with the truth, realizes that losing Dany as a son is only part of the problem. The bigger fear is that Dany is being pulled into a world Jason cannot protect him from, a world Jason has fought against his entire life. This new identity adjustment becomes a central driving force of Dany's storyline. He is no longer simply Jason's child, he is Valentin's heir. He is no longer simply a boy navigating adolescence, he is becoming a Cassadine player. And as he steps further into that identity, the danger grows exponentially. Because a new Cassadine heir is not a blessing, it is an earthquake, a threat, a shift that ripples through every family in Port Charles. And the most chilling realization is this: Dany is only just beginning to understand what he is capable of. Jason's shock may be the first explosion, but Dany's transformation will be the one that changes everything. The revelation that Dany carries the Cassadine bloodline does not simply alter the trajectory of his life, it destroys the boundaries that once kept him safe. It turns innocence into instability, curiosity into darkness, and his quiet presence into a brewing storm capable of reshaping Port Charles in ways none of the adults around him are prepared for. The moment Dany learns, he is tied not to Jason Morgan's legacy of loyalty and sacrifice, but to the Cassadine dynasty of manipulation, cruelty, and brilliance. Something begins to unfurl inside him, something ancient, cold, and terribly familiar to anyone who has ever faced a Cassadine at their peak. And it is a shift that pushes a storyline into a new, unhinged level of chaos, where every move Dany makes becomes unpredictable, deliberate, and potentially deadly. Dany's transformation is not loud or violent at first. It starts in silence, a sharpening of his instincts, a new clarity in his thoughts, an unsettling sense of purpose that feels foreign and intoxicating. For the first time, he understands why he has always felt a step ahead of others his age, why danger never frightened him the way it should have, why he could see patterns in people that others missed. Now, he knows. He understands. He is a Cassadine, and Cassadines do not simply survive, they dominate. This internal shift becomes the foundation for a darker evolution. Dany begins to study people the way Helena once studied her enemies, quietly, carefully, always several steps ahead. He watches Sidwell and Brennan with a precision that feels unnerving, as if he can see beneath their expressions, beneath their carefully guarded motivations, into the weaknesses they try to hide. The Cassadine instinct, once dormant, begins to shape every decision he makes. He becomes less reactive and more calculating, less emotional and more strategic. Even his silence becomes a weapon, a way of gathering information without revealing what he knows. And as Dany changes, the world around him becomes more dangerous. Sidwell, with his hunger for power and willingness to manipulate anyone who gets in his way, senses a shift in Dany. At first, Sidwell dismisses it as childish angst. But when Dany begins to outmaneuver him in subtle, unsettling ways, interrupting conversations at the exact moments Sidwell is lying, appearing unexpectedly when Sidwell is planning something, catching details no one should notice, Sidwell begins to realize he is no longer dealing with a vulnerable child. He is facing a Cassadine heir, one whose potential is still unknown. Sidwell starts looking over his shoulder. He starts questioning whether Dany knows too much, or worse, whether Dany intends to use what he knows against him. And Sidwell has good reason to be afraid. Dany's new instincts do not merely reveal danger, they magnify it. Brennan, meanwhile, senses a shift through an entirely different lens. He has spent years navigating the criminal world, reading people with precision, analyzing threats with a soldier's instinct. But even Brennan cannot fully understand the darkness awakening inside Dany. He sees flashes of something chilling in the boy, something controlled, something calculating, something reminiscent of the Cassadines he has faced in the past. Brennan has fought dangerous men, but this is different. Dany is not corrupted by trauma or greed. He is being shaped by blood, by lineage, by a legacy that predates him, and now pulses through him like a second heartbeat. And Brennan knows enough about the Cassadines to understand one terrifying truth. The most dangerous Cassadine is always the one who doesn't yet understand the extent of his power. Dany's transformation affects Charlotte as well, not because she fears him, but because she recognizes what is happening. She sees a shift the way only another Cassadine can. She feels a change in Dany's energy, the subtle chills in his voice, the quiet confidence growing in his posture. It frightens her not because Dany reminds her of Valentine or Victor, but because he reminds her of Helena, the witch of their bloodline whose shadow still drapes itself across every generation. Charlotte watches Dany with dread, admiration, and powerless grief. She knows what the Cassadine curse does to people. She knows Dany is standing at the edge of a transformation that could turn him into something unstoppable. The dark event looming over Dany is not a single incident, but a slow build and inevitability. The more he understands his power, the more he becomes aware of the secrets surrounding Sidwell, Brennan, and the interconnected dangers of Port Charles. The more he feels compelled to test the boundaries of what he can do. There is a part of Dany, a part he never knew existed, that wants to intervene, to manipulate, to strike first. A part that whispers he does not need protection. A part that tells him he was born to outplay the adults who think they control the board. And this is where the storyline veers into madness. Dany begins constructing plans in his head, not childish fantasies, but structured, meticulous strategies. He begins to consider how to expose Sidwell without being detected. He imagines how to corner Brennan intellectually rather than physically, how to destabilize alliances that threaten the people he cares about. He does not act yet, but the blueprint forms in his mind with chilling clarity. His Cassadine blood is teaching him how to think like a predator, even if he has not yet become one. This adjustment, this quiet but consuming shift, becomes the core of a new, explosive narrative. Dany, heir to the darkest dynasty, standing at the threshold of something catastrophic. Jason senses a change but cannot comprehend it. He sees flashes of something in Dany's eyes that should not be there, something colder, sharper. He tries to reach him, but Dany is drifting away, pulled toward a future Jason cannot protect him from. And this is what terrifies Jason the most. He knows danger. He understands violence, but he has never faced a threat that comes from inside someone he loves. Dany's evolution is not simply a storyline twist, it is the beginning of a transformation that could reshape the moral landscape of Port Charles. Because Dany is not becoming evil. He is becoming Cassadine, and that is far more terrifying. It means he can be brilliant, ruthless, loyal, dangerous, or heroic, and possibly all of these things at once. And Sidwell and Brennan, they are standing directly in the path of this awakening. Whether they survive Dany's rise depends entirely on how far he is willing to go. When the Cassadine instincts finally consume him, and judging by the darkness growing behind his eyes, Port Charles has not even begun to understand the storm he is about to unleash.